What up, gang? It's Mang. In this Innistrad Remastered draft guide, I'm going to go over everything you need to know before your draft night next weekend. Innistrad hits the shelves January 24th. Let's get into it. As for an overview for this draft guide, we will be talking about the top commons, archetypes, combat tricks, tips, combos, and some traps that I've uncovered already for you. Starting off with the top commons, we will go into white. At number 1, we have Lunarch Veteran, a 1-mana 1/1 with Disturb. Whenever another creature you control enters the battlefield, you gain 1 life. This is going to be gaining you tons of life throughout the match, and then you'll be able to cast the Disturb portion, which is a 1/1 flyer with the same effect. It's just endless value, keeps your life total high. Rarely are you in a position that you're not the aggressor. You have more life than your opponent, more flexibility to be the pressure and win those games. Number 2, we have Gather the Townsfolk. We already liked Resolute Reinforcements from MTG Foundations, and this is a similar card with upside. For 2 mana, you create 2 1/1 human creature tokens at sorcery speed, which is fine, but that Fateful Hour is something to keep in mind of. If you have 5 or less life, you create 5 of those tokens instead. So 2 mana to create 5 1/1s in a pinch, in arguably the most important turns of the game, when you're at 5 life, is very powerful. This is one I'm going to be prioritizing early for my go wide white strategies. At number 3, Thraben Inspector. We've seen Novice Inspector in the past, and these cards have always been strong. A 1-mana 1/2 that enters and allows you to investigate, creating you a clue, giving you some 2-for-1 value later in the match is always good. Probably one of the best 1-drops you can play in the set, and you're going to notice white has multiples of those. They want to play a lot of weenies, go wide, flood your opponent out. Next up is blue. We have Lantern Bearer taking the 1 spot here. A 1-mana 1/1 with flying is already a great card. Add in the Disturb value you get, being able to enchant a creature and give it flying. It allows you to put flying onto one of your larger threats at the end of a match and close out games. Just a very strong card in blue. At number 2 is Delver of Secrets. Another 1-mana 1/1. I don't know if you've seen a theme here or not, but at the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top card of your library, you may reveal the card, and if it's an instant or sorcery, you already transform this into a 3/2 flyer. That is such insane upside that I am going to be taking this card early if I'm in blue. If you are able to flip this on turn 2, you are way ahead. Your opponent has to use a removal spell then on your 1-drop. The value is already baked in to this card here. At number 3 is Tower Geist. For 4 mana, you get a 2/2 flyer. When this enters, look at the top 2 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand and the other into your graveyard. You'll notice that in Innistrad Remastered, there is a ton of graveyard synergy. Everything from flashback to cards that care about the number of creatures in your graveyard, casting cards from your graveyard, madness. There's a lot of mechanics that care about cards in the graveyard, and Tower Geist is going to fuel that along with your spirit synergies. This is just a solid 4-drop. Next up, let's talk about black. Coming in at number 1 is another MTG Foundation staple, Eaten Alive. This 1-mana sorcery, if you're able to sacrifice another creature with the casting cost, allows you to exile target creature or planeswalker. Later on in the game, if you want to keep your stuff, you can pay the full 5 mana to just exile the scariest thing on the board. Just a very strong removal card in black. At number 2 is another 1-mana 1/1, Ecstatic Awakener. This creature has an ability for 2 colorless and a black. You're able to sacrifice another creature, draw a card, and then transform this creature into a 4/4. This card really allows you to play mind games with your opponent. Being able to apply blocks and then sacrifice using this ability, it soaks up so much incoming damage, whether you sacrifice the creature you chump blocked with. Maybe you ate the creature you were blocking here. Maybe you're bluffing doing this action the whole time. There's a lot of flexibility you have with this card, and I'm a big fan of it. At number 3 is Village Rites. We've seen this effect in other sets. As additional cost to cast this card, you sacrifice a creature and you draw 2 cards. There's a lot of creatures we want to hit the graveyard. There's creatures that have death triggers. There's morbid triggers in this set. You're going to be able to find 2-for-1 value with Village Rites more often than not. Maybe you apply a block, for example, and you sacrifice the creature after making blocks. you stopped incoming damage, you drew some cards, maybe there was a death trigger involved. There's just a lot of cool things we can do here in a set that really cares about graveyard and death triggers. In red, these cards were easy to pick from. I think red is going to end up being one of the stronger colors in this set. With number 1, we have Abrade. This card's been in multiple sets. It's nothing new. You get to choose one of these effects to deal 3 damage to target creature at instant speed or destroy target artifact. I think you're going to be dealing 3 damage more often than not based on the artifacts we've seen leaked so far. Abrade is just an excellent removal spell. At number 2 is another fan favorite, Voldaren Epicure. This 1-mana 1/1, when this creature enters, it deals 1 damage to each opponent and you create a blood token. So the blood tokens are very important for the Rakdos deck. Lots of vampires, lots of blood tokens, it's fitting. That just gives you more tools in your toolbox to sacrifice for card draw later or for other effects that cards have. Blood Petal Celebrant is taking the 3rd spot. This is another vampire that has first strike as long as it's attacking. So being able to put some counters on this creature would be very effective. Maybe equipping some equipments onto the creature, making it a very difficult to deal with first striker, is why this card has a lot of value. And then when it dies, it also creates a blood token. So you'll see a theme here when we get into archetypes, but red, it packs a punch. There's a lot of good removal and a lot of good high quality creatures, which makes this one of the best colors in the set. Next up we have green. Coming in number 1, Spore Crawler. This is a 3-mana 3/2 at common. When it dies, you draw a card. That 3 power might not seem like much. That's enough to trade with probably 60 to 70% of the early plays in the game, which we love to see, and we're going to draw a card from it. It's just a baked in 2-for-1 and why it's going to have the 1 spot for me. These are all subject to change, of course, but coming in at number 2, Eccentric Farmer. This card reminds me of Patient Naturalist from Outlaws of Thunder Junction, but when this 2/3 enters, mill 3 cards, then you may return a land card from your graveyard to your hand. This just keeps you on curve. You're not missing land drops, ideally, and you're fueling your graveyard. Black-green really cares about the graveyard. Eccentric Farmer is going to be the meat and potatoes of a lot of these decks. And at number 3, we have Brambleworm. This is a 7-mana creature that gains you 5 life when it enters. It has reach, it has trample, and then when it's in the graveyard, you can actually exile it for 2 and a green to gain another 5 life. So 7 mana is very expensive, but if we are playing green creatures, they need to be able to block the opposing creatures' flyers, high power creatures, and stabilize the board. So being able to gain the 5 life and have the biggest body on the creature that can ideally block everything in the set is what I like to see in my large green commons. Now, it does die to Eaten Alive, it does die to destroy target creature effects, but I think red is going to have a big issue trying to remove this creature with deal damage removal. So depending on the matchup, I think Brambleworm, it may be a sideboard piece, but this is a brick wall. Your opponent's going to have to figure out how to get through it. Okay, and it's too early to rank the colors, obviously, but first impressions are important. I'm going to be making iterations to this as the set becomes more played. These are my first impressions. Take them with a grain of salt. Coming in at number 1, I have red as the best colors. I just think it has so many good quality common creatures along with the removal that if I'm taking red cards early in the draft, I can become a red-green aggressive deck, a red-black blood token deck, red-white go wide. There's just so many different ways to build off of a red base. So I think red is going to be the best color. Black is where you're going to be able to see all the removal. I have this at the 2 spot. Lots of good removal, lots of good graveyard synergy. I think black is loaded for the late game. It's ready to grind. White has a lot of those good 1-drops I was talking about. I do think you need to sprinkle in a second color to give it some life, but you're able to overwhelm your opponent very easily with the cheap white creatures. You should be gaining life along the way. They have Disturb on most of these white creatures. There's a lot of good things here. I just think it's probably average. I think it's right here at the 3rd spot where it belongs. Number 4, we have blue. Blue has a lot of good tempo and flyers, as it should. It does in most sets. The spirits deck looks very powerful. Zombies looks very good. I think you can overwhelm your opponent in the air, making them have to have reach creatures or flyers to match. It's a little bit lacking though on the interaction I would like to see. We need a few more bounce spells. We need a few more counter spells in general. You're kind of missing that element of counterplay that other sets typically have. No essence scatter, no, premium removal. It in the counter spell spot is what's holding this color back, in my opinion. And then green's going to be my least favorite color at the moment. Not to say never draft green. There's some pretty awesome creatures in there, some good graveyard decks you can make. The Golgari Mill deck, for example, looks very strong. I just think the creatures don't stabilize the board as well as they should. There's not a lot of reach in green, surprisingly. Not a lot of flyers in green. I think getting damage in can be a challenge at times in green. I don't like relying on punch and fight spells in green because they are subject to getting blown out. So for that reason, I'm placing green as my least favorite color at the moment. This is all going to change probably in a weekend once we actually get to play with the cards, but use these as a tiebreaker when you're doing your draft. Let's talk about the 10 archetypes. First up, we have green-white, which is featured by Join the Dance. For 2 mana, you create 2 1/1 white human creature tokens. It's basically gather the townsfolk with flashback, and arguably less upside. You don't get that create 5 tokens instead effect if you have 5 or less life. Green-white wants to go wide. It cares about humans. It's a human-centric deck where Hamlet Captain, for example, is the creature that whenever this one attacks or blocks, other humans you control get +1/+1 till end of turn. So you're doing the go wide thing, you're pumping the board, and you're just trying to win the game, by turn 5 or 6 if you can. It's lacking a little bit of card draw, but if you're able to build a overwhelming force early, you can close out games quickly. You might not be playing that one too long. Next, we have blue-red, which is featured by Wandering Mind. This is a 3-mana 2/1 flyer that when it enters, look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a non-creature, non-land card from among them and put it into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. This cares about casting and slinging spells and dealing damage, not through combat. Thermo Alchemist is back. This is one of everyone's favorite, catapult slingy effects, where every time you tap this creature, it deals 1 damage to each opponent, and then whenever you cast an instant or sorcery, you untap this creature. There are going to be turns later in the game, between all the flashback spells, all the card draw effects, where you can tap Thermo Alchemist and untap them upwards to 4 or 5 times, closing out games in a hurry. So this is a card that's going to push me into the red-blue archetype as a signal. So Thermo Alchemist is one I'm a big fan of. Next, let's talk about the Orzhov deck, led by Flesh Taker as the signpost uncommon. This is a 2-mana 2/2. Whenever you sacrifice another creature, you gain 1 life and scry 1. You can pay 1 to sack another creature. This creature also gets +2/+2 until end of turn. This is a constant threat on the battlefield. If it goes unblocked and you have a large board presence, you can deal immense damage if your opponent has nothing to deal with it. Throw in some card draw triggers from Morbid Opportunist. This is a commander staple. Whenever one or more other creatures die, you draw a card. You're going to be doing this on your turn, on your opponent's turn. There's just so much card value built into this engine here. And then Lingering Souls. This card is super flexible, but it shines in this deck specifically when you can play the flashback cost. So for 3 mana, you get 2 1/1 white spirit creature tokens, and you're going to do it again. You're going to double dip, make 2 more spirits if you're in this deck. This is probably my shot call for my favorite deck in the set, and I hope I get some of these staples when I'm doing my first draft. Let's talk about red-green. So the Gruul deck, we actually don't have the signpost uncommons for them. If someone has seen them, let me know in the comments, but I'm going off of the werewolf synergy that we've seen thus far. I'm not sure what the signpost uncommon is supposed to be, but Huntmaster of the Fells, it's obviously a strong card. Whenever this creature enters or transforms into Huntmaster of the Fells, you create a 2/2 green wolf. So They're no longer calling it night and day. At the beginning of each upkeep, if no spells were cast, you transform this creature. So they just kind of got rid of the night and day keywords. They kind of stopped with the confusion there. Red-green is just going to trample. It's going to transform into werewolves. And there's a lot of payoffs for having the werewolf creature type. Gone is night and day, but it's basically still there. It's just less confusing now. Duskwatch Recruiter, you're able to pay 2 and a green to look at the top 3 cards of your library, reveal a creature card from among them, put them in your hand, rest on the bottom of your library. This also transforms into a 3/3. A lot of nice curve out plays that grow when you don't cast stuff. So this is a deck that actually rewards you for not casting things. I guess you want to have some instant spell combat tricks, some cards that will be able to be cast on your opponent's turn in the late game, because you're actually going to want to transform these guys if you're going to want to win the game, because as is, they are not strong enough on their own. So this deck could be tricky. You need a good balance of threats and instant speed or cards with flash to get the full value out of this deck. Now we can talk about the Boros deck with Markov Waltzer. This is a 4-mana, 1/3 flyer with haste, and at the beginning of combat on your turn, up to 2 target creatures each get +1/+0. So this is not a set that cares about Valiant triggers or Heroic, like we've seen in recent memory, but still a very strong card. This is going to be able to swing in right as you play it and buff your board with cards like Rally the Peasants. So white wants to go wide. This is similar to green-white, but creatures you control get +2 and 0 until end of turn, and then you can flashback this as well. So hopefully you are making a big crowd of humans, big crowd of vampires, and setting yourself up for a mass pump swing. You want to turn Boros cards sideways. That's nothing new, and we have some tools here to make sure we're dealing lethal damage. I'm going to butcher this one, but Subjudicator Angel? Subjudicator Angel is a 6-mana, 4/3 flyer, and when it enters, you tap all your creatures your opponent controls. This is going to open the floodgates for all the damage that you could ever want to deal. I think this is slept on. Yes, it looks expensive on the surface. This is a card I'm going to want at the top end of a lot of my Boros decks. Okay, let's get into the cool creature type decks where we have our zombie deck in Dimir. Blade Stitch Scab is a 2-mana 2/3, already great. We love 2-mana 2/3s because they block well, but they also give other zombies you control +1/+0. So this is a deck that cares about zombies. You're going to be making a lot of decayed zombies. There's cards like Rise from the Tides that cares about instants and sorceries in the graveyard. So whether you're milling those cards into the graveyard yourself or casting a bunch of spells throughout the game, you're able to cash those in to make a bunch of zombies. These ones come in tapped, notably, but they don't have decay. That's where things can get confusing. Decay zombies are ones that when they swing, they are automatically sacrificed at the end step. So make sure you are on the lookout for that. Is it a decayed zombie? Is it just a 2/2 black zombie that can block? Decayed zombies can't. I don't know why they're different, but they're different. So just keep that in mind. And then Compelling Deterrence. I think this is a really flavorful card. This one's cool. 2-mana, return target non-land permanent. Doesn't have to be a creature. Non-land permanent to its owner's hand. So you can save your own creature. You can bounce maybe a scary enchantment your opponent has. Then that player discards a card if you control a zombie. So hopefully if you're in this deck, you're able to bounce something scary or save something important, as well as make your opponent discard a card for 2 mana. So that's really good rate. That's what I'm calling excellent tempo play. That's a card I'm a big fan of, and I think this deck has some legs. Let's talk about a black-green Golgari deck with Grizzly Ghoul, a 4-mana 4/3 with trample. This creature enters with a 1/1 counter on it for each creature that died this turn. It's kind of like Morbid from Foundations, but a one-time use. You're going to get this ETB. Casting Grizzly Ghoul in the second main phase is obviously important here. You want to swing in, make some trades, potentially have a 4-mana 6/5 Trampler. Could even be bigger. You could have a 7/6 or an 8/7, never know. It'll be a very important combat exchange before casting Grizzly Ghoul. And then we have Grapple with the Past. This is an instant, kind of like Cash Grab from Bloom Burrow. You're able to mill 3 cards, then you may return a creature or land card from your graveyard to your hand. Notice how it doesn't say of the milled cards to your hand. You can get anything back. So you can get any land, any important creature. You're filling the graveyard, but you're also getting back something you actually care about. You're not restricted to those 3 cards you milled. I think this card is going to be very strong. And then Spider Spawning. This is a 5 mana sorcery where you create a 1/2 green spider with reach for each creature card in your graveyard. A 1/2 with reach. So we'll say we feel really good about this card if we, create 4 spiders. 5 mana, create 4 1/2 spiders with reach would already be a bomb. And the fact that you can do it twice if you're in Golgari with the flashback cost, there's a lot of upside and build around playing spider spawning. I would ideally want a deck with 15 to 18 creatures to get the most out of this card, but you can assemble a brick wall of chump blockers. Your opponent's just going to be wasting tons of time dealing with, and you're growing maybe a trample creature or finding a way to push damage elsewhere while you just fend them off with 1/2 spiders. This card seems very strong. Definitely a build around card. Okay, this is one of my predictions as well. I think Rakdos is going to be one of the strongest archetypes in the set. It's led by none other than Bloodtithe Harvester. This is a card that we see in Vintage Cube sometimes. It's that powerful. A 2 mana 3/2 that when it enters creates a blood token, and then you can also tap him to sacrifice this creature and give a creature -X/-X until end of turn, where X is twice the number of blood tokens you control. So this deck is full of vampires. You're making tons of blood tokens throughout the game. You could have upwards to 3 or 4, and then Bloodtithe Harvester, turning those blood tokens into a source of removal as well as looting, is really what pushes this deck over the top. We already talked about Voldarian Epicure and Blood Petal Celebrant in the commons. Red's just got some powerful creatures, and if you have them in this vampire-centric deck, I think it's a recipe for success. A lot of 2-for-1 value here, and the creature quality is great. Your opponent's going to have a tough time blocking the first strike that you'll have with Blood Petal Celebrant. Rakdos is right up there for me with the Orzhov deck. I think those are going to be my 2 favorite decks to play. Next up, let's talk about this Simic deck led by Vilespawn Spider. Now this is a great stabilizer. For 2 mana, this is our 2/3 body we love to see with reach. Thank God this has reach. And at the beginning of your upkeep, mill a card. Later on in the game, you can sacrifice this creature to create a 1/1 green insect token for each creature card in your graveyard. So you're going to be doing a lot of self-mill, a lot of trading off early on in the game. But Vilespawn Spider, it reminds me of Brood Spinner from Duskmourn. Just an excellent body with immediate board presence with the reach. And then late game, you can fill the board with a bunch of creatures as well. Along those same lines, we have Ghoul Tree. This is an 8 mana creature that's a 10/10. With all the self-mill, you're not paying 8 mana for this card ever, hopefully. Hopefully you're paying 3 or 4 mana for a 10/10. And then giving it trample later, ideally, so that you win the game. But this card costs 1 less for each creature card in your graveyard. You see the theme here. Eccentric Farmer fills your yard, makes stuff cheaper, makes the spider better late game. I think Simic is going to be good too. Most sets, I don't know what it is, but in Limited, they always have a tough time making Simic relevant, and this looks promising to me. As long as you have creatures with reach, 10/10s, if we can push damage in some way or another, I think this deck's going to be powerful too. Last but not least, we have Azorius Spirits. So I also don't see a signpost uncommon for this archetype just yet. So I'm going to highlight Spell Queller. Just an excellent flyer. Flash, flying, 2/3. When this enters, exile target spell with mana value 4 or less. And when this creature leaves the battlefield, the exile card's owner may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Say for example, your opponent targets removal at one of your creatures. Spell Queller can be flashed in. You save that creature temporarily by exiling it, And then when Spell Queller ultimately dies, or if it ever does, you get to recast that card for free, as long as it was 4 or less. Alternatively, you can use Spell Queller pretty aggressively. You can remove a important blocker from your opponent and hopefully close out the game before Spell Queller ever dies. But let's talk about the cards you're going to be seeing more often with Lantern Bearer. This was our top common in blue. 1/1 flyer, put flying on creatures later in the game with Disturb. And then I also love Essence Flux in this deck. A 1 mana instant that allows you to blink a creature, and if it's a spirit, you put a 1/1 counter on it, is excellent. You can assign blocking damage. You can dodge removal spell for 1 mana. Maybe they used a 5 mana, Eaten Alive, or, an expensive removal spell to remove some of your spirits. You can save it for 1, make it bigger, and if it's a spirit, it grows. You can't really beat that. Shifting gears to the combat tricks that you need to look out for when playing this set. First up, we have Borrowed Hostility. This is a 1 mana red spell that allows you to give a target creature +3/+0 until end of turn, or give a creature first strike. This is a dangerous card to watch out for. In a scenario where you think you were trading with your opponent, you might straight up lose your creature and fall behind. And in a scenario where you think you are the enforcer, they can trade with a 1/1 that becomes a 4/1 out of nowhere. Be on the lookout if your opponent has 1 red mana up. I think this is going to be a powerful combat trick. In green, they have access to Aim High, which is a 2 mana spell that untaps target creature. So when you think their defense is down, they might not be. They can pop back up to block. It gets +2/+2 and reach until end of turn. This is green's answer at common to a lot of those pesky flyers. This is one to watch out for. And then Tragic Slip, you can use it as a combat trick. The -1/-1 effect is relevant, but you also have to be cautious if they chump block. If they chump block with a zombie into your 5/5, they can then cast Tragic Slip to -13/-13 it. There's a lot of Tragic Banshee callbacks here. If an attack seems suspicious or a block seems fishy in black, you got to be on the lookout for this 1 mana removal effect. This is a card that I'm going to be taking often because I think I can find usage for it, and I'm sure you will too. But this is one I would draft. And then Strength of Arms. This is the classic 1 mana +2/+2 effect that you see in white, and you get a little bit of niche upside where if you control an equipment, you also get a 1/1 white soldier. That's pretty sweet. I don't know how many equipments I actually want to play. I don't think there's many good ones, so I'm not sure that comes up often, but 1 mana +2/+2, like that's something white has access to. I'm not sure how many copies they would actually run, but this is out there, so just keep these in mind when you're drafting and playing your games. Let's talk about some traps. Cards I would personally not take highly or avoid entirely. Don't waste picks on these. I think they're too situational. First up is Wildfield Scarecrow. This is a 3 mana colorless artifact defender where you can pay 2 to sacrifice this creature to go find 2 basic lands, but you put them to hand. This is not Burnished Heart. They don't come to the battlefield immediately. I just think we're wasting too much mana for something that's not too impactful on the board. I'm going to pass on Wildfield Scarecrow. Next, we have Howlpack Resurgence in green. This is actually an uncommon. You can flash it in, and each creature you control, that's a wolf or werewolf, gets +1/+1 and has trample. If it was +2/+2, yeah, I'm in. +1/+1 though, for 3, doesn't impact the board immediately on its own. So like, if I have it in my starting hand, I'm feeling iffy about it. I need to have wolves and werewolves. It just, I think you're pigeonholing yourself to drafting that deck if you take this early. And sure, it's a nice to have late if you're in green-red and have a bunch of wolves. No thanks. I'm just going to pass on it. Then we have Blood Mist. This is a 4 mana enchantment, another uncommon. At the beginning of combat on your turn, target creature you control gains double strike. Sure, that's cool. But 4 mana, do nothing to the board to potentially get my creature in for double damage is cool. It is strong. If your opponent doesn't have removal or played a creature that would still block it. I mean, I can't take turn 4 off to not impact the board. I'm not sure this does enough if I'm on the draw. So especially if I'm on the draw, I don't think I'm playing Blood Mist. All right, I'm gonna try to say this one. Triskaidekaphobia. Yeah, don't play this either. This is like Hidetsu's second right, where you're trying to deal exact points of damage to your opponent to win the game. This is not constructed. We're talking about limited here. Just do yourself a favor and try to make this card work maybe later on in the format, not when you're paying at your local game shop for packs. This is not something I would try to force. Okay, I got 3 combos for you. Let's cover them now. Noose Constrictor. This card is scary. I mean, at any point, we've seen Psychic Frog in the past. These cards that have discard a card, you gain that much power and toughness until end of turn. It also has reach. You never know what your opponent's going to do. He might actually have combos like Fiery Temper that have Madness. So this is a way for you to discard cards, cast them for 1 red mana, and then redirect 3 damage elsewhere with Fiery Temper for its Madness cost. Pretty sweet combo. You can put it Noose Constrictor plus any Madness card here, and you're going to be feeling pretty good. There's a lot of payoffs here. Next up in black, we have Ecstatic Awakener and Butcher Ghoul. So we already talked about the Awakener, where you can pay 3 to sack a creature, transform it into a 4/4 and draw a card. But Butcher Ghoul has Undying, so when you do sacrifice it, it's coming right back to the battlefield as a 2/2. No harm, no foul, and you drew a card, and you have a 4/4 now. Pretty sweet. Try to do that. This last one's weird. I don't know if it's a good combo, but hey, it's in there. It might come up. I hope someone can do it, but Hanweir Garrison. For 3 mana, whenever this creature attacks, create 2 1/1 red human creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. And then we have a rare land, Hanweir Battlements. Add 1 colorless mana. You can pay a red and tap this to target creature and gains haste until end of turn. Kind of like that Rockface Village from Loomburrow. That effect honestly might come up more than the 5 mana one, where if you have both of these in play, you can actually meld this creature into Hanweir, the Writhing Township. This Abomination Eldrazi Ooze has Trample and Haste. It's a 7/4, and whenever it attacks, you create 2 3/2 horror creature tokens that are tapped and attacking. It's a combo. It's on here. I had to share it because I thought it was cool that it's even an option for us. But good luck trying to do this one. I do think Battlements is good enough on its own, though, giving creatures haste to be worth playing. If I'm in a solid, 2-color deck in red, I'm going to be looking at that one. These are some combos to keep an eye out for. Mana fixing for this set. We have the slow lands back in rotation here. This land enters tapped unless you control 2 or more other lands. They're not fast lands, they're slow in nature, but they allow you to splash. They keep you from, not having the mana you need. So that's what we have at access to us as far as duels go. And then Wildfield Scarecrow, we touched on this one. Not a fan personally, but if you need it, maybe you're playing 3 colors and you could really use one, he's there. And then Evolving Wilds is in this set, which is always great. I'm taking those, anywhere from pick 6 to 9. Can't really go wrong with Evolving Wilds. So we also have Traveler's Amulet. This is a 1-mana artifact where you can pay 1 to sacrifice this to go find a basic land, reveal it, and put it into your hand. Kind of like Evolving Wilds, you're able to thin out the deck a little bit and go get the fixing that you need in a pinch. Alright, I'm going to leave you with 2 hot takes before I end this video. The Graveyard Matters decks, I think they're all excellent. I think they have a lot of overlap. You can be drafting these cards in the black, blue, green archetypes early and find your lane later on. So whether you're a Simic, go large or ramp, or maybe you're a Golgari, reanimate, I can see myself ending up with a lot of Sultai flashback piles and feeling pretty good, whether I'm in zombies or spirits or spiders or creatures with trample. I think graveyard decks are going to be very strong. And then my other important note for you guys is don't sweat over your creature types. It's going to be easy to get tunnel visioned like in Bloomburrow on your creature types, your zombies, your werewolves, vampires. They're contested. I mean, you can't hope to get 15 werewolves and 15 vampires. It's just not going to come together that way. You got to be thinking of the archetypes more holistically. Go wide, aggressive, Graveyard Matters. Maybe I'm going for Flyers. Maybe I'm going for spell slinging damage, casting multiple cards a turn. There's unique archetypes here that are not so dependent on creatures. I think that's where a lot of early drafters in this set are going to get tripped up. They're going to be trying to build the werewolf deck or the vampire deck and get frustrated when they don't get all the pieces that they thought they needed, when in reality you could just be taking solid cards in your aggressive or control archetypes and be more happy with your drafts. That's all I got though. You guys have the best of luck at your draft events on the 24th. Some shops are doing it earlier, I heard. Let me know how it goes in the comments. If you made it this far, type hashtag Innistrad in the comments. I want to see if anyone made it to this part of the video. This took a lot of work to put together. I did my homework. I tried to make it as concise as possible, and I already know I rambled too long, but stick around. I do a lot of educational content, and I'm going to be doing previews for the new Aether Drift set next month. Be on the lookout for that. I hope to do more guides in the future, and I hope this helped someone out there. That's all I can ask for. Leave a like and a subscribe on the way out, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.